Welcome to Turmeric and Tequila with your host, Kristen Olson. Questioning a better way, one gracefully disruptive conversation at a time.
Welcome to Turmeric and Tequila. We are on video. We are on air-ish. I'm pumped today. We have the podcast creators of Dear White Women. Dear White Women podcast. I should keep it all brand consistent. Sara and Misasha. This is actually really special because where are you from again?
From the Bay Area.
The Bay Area, California, and then Colorado.
Mm-hmm.
So it's special that we get to be face to face, and I do all my podcasts as much as I can face to face. So it's phenomenal to have that opportunity. So thank you for being here. I'm going to let them introduce themselves, and we'll start with personal background. So hit us with your personal 411, and then we'll get into the podcast.
Okay. Go for it.
All right. I'm Sara. This part will be similar to both of us. I am the daughter of I'm half Japanese, half white.
Okay.
My mom is an immigrant from Japan, and I grew up in the East Coast. I grew up speaking Japanese, and then sort of have lived all over the place in my adult life. Wound up marrying a Canadian man and have 2 daughters.
Okay.
And then in terms of my interests, I kind of sold my soul to finance for a while. And,
Necessary lesson.
right?
Where did you grow up out east?
In New York.
Like
In the suburbs, in the suburbs.
Oh.
But Manhattan was my city of reference,
Oh,
so my mom,
New York. Okay.
I don't know how before the days of cell phones, my mom let me go into Manhattan starting in 9th grade by myself, but she did, and I remember putting quarters into the payphones, being like, I'm here, it's
Yeah,
great.
I still have payphones, but
Oh,
this
it's
is
been all
Aurora,
day.
not
Yeah.
so like no street cred here, but yes.
I think my brothers must have just been keeping her busy because I was set free to go do whatever I wanted to do, which was amazing. But so that adventure spirit has carried me on to wherever, all the places. So I sold my soul to finance in order to work in Tokyo and in Hong Kong.
Okay.
So I lived out there for a while. Amazing company, amazing people, had a great time. But when my dad died, I was 26, and it was time for me to. His tagline on email was always "keep the balance, keep the balance," and he was my biggest cheerleader, which sounds cheesy. My husband's like, "That's the lamest thing to say," but he was really my.
We're here for all cliches, by the way. So you just put it out there. You'll save space for that.
He was always like, "You always have a place to come home to, so go, spread your wings." And it was such a cool thing. So when he died, and it was pretty sudden, it was like we found out he was sick, and a month later he was dead.
Oh, okay.
It was great as things go. It was graceful and all of those things, but it really made me reevaluate everything.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, oh, we don't live forever. He was 59.
Yeah.
So I, at that point, left finance.
That is so young. Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm like, So I...
Just like hard breakup, like life evaluation, move on?
Yeah, like, I mean, I was depressed, for sure. And then I took a leave of absence, and I found out that mental health is the top reason people take these leave of absences that I thought were so mysterious and for bigger purposes.
Mm-hmm.
But it was mental health. And they were like, oh, yeah, no, everyone does this. I get it. And when I reflected, it was time to leave. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I worked in a coffee shop in Brooklyn for a while.
Okay. Yes. Oh my God, I love that entire way. Oh my God.
And then met all these people who were doing what they loved. And I'm like, I can do that too.
This is a thing.
I didn't know.
Well, we're not really taught to think that way, but okay, yeah.
And then, long story short, I ran into an old college advisor. He was like my favorite teaching fellow. And my mom was like, you need to come with me to this yoga retreat. I'm like, why? But okay, fine. And it was because I had literally just been like, I don't remember that guy's name, but he taught me really cool things about positive psych and how to thrive. And I wish I remembered his name. And he literally was sitting in the room across from us in a big circle on sabbatical for 2 weeks in the United States, and that was the one weekend he was at that place.
How do you, oh, come on, energy, you gotta lean into a little bit here, like, that's huge. I mean, yes, universe speaks, that is entirely serendipitous, yes.
So totally. So we wound up connecting, he told me all about life coaching, positive psychology, and I like lit up, like, this is what I'm meant to do. So I learned all about it. Trained, so I'm a life coach. I am involved in positive psychology. I help teach it. I go to the summits. Like, this is what I am all about. That's my meaning and my purpose. So that has.
How old were you when this pivot point happened?
I was 26 when my dad died. I was probably 27, 28. Then I taught at so I was 29. So all in my late 20s when I was making these decisions and figuring out where to go and opportunities. You know, when you're in alignment, they just sort of happen.
Yeah.
If you're looking for
you're
them.
looking for happens to be the coffee shop that changed your, yeah, man.
So yeah, that happened. And that has basically carried me on to, you know, I was home with my kids for a while.
Yeah.
I lost my mind doing that, but it was so good.
Also important for moms to, I'm not a mom, so I'm a dog mom, but like I think that's, we need to shake that stigma, I think, a little bit.
It's the hardest thing I've ever done.
Oh,
oh my goodness.
Respect, Matt. My mom, I'm one of 4, and I'm the oldest girl with my 3 brothers, and we're good kids. But oh my God, and she wanted to stay at home. Like before my parents were married, she's like, "This is what I'm doing," and it was like this was her business, and she loved every second of it. But I look back and I'm like, oh. And I coached for 9 years women's lacrosse, and I'm like, oh, 2 hours a day is good. Brother, 23, holler at your parents. Like this is a whole undertaking. Like respect to all my moms and dads.
So I emerged when the kid went to school, and I did a few things since then. I mean, I guess you're going to be like, you have to say it, but I wrote a book.
Oh, okay.
Just a few things.
Yeah,
I did a TEDx talk. Like, I found my voice. I think I basically, the upshot is after I left my career, figured out what I wanted to do, and then lost my voice for a while because I was so internally focused being a mom. When I had more freedom and capacity to really think about it and reflect, I feel like I found my voice more and more and more. And I think that's why I'm like super excited that you and I, Misasha, are doing this podcast, because this is really what I'm meant to be doing. It's my skill set, my interests. It's so safe in this setting, to work with my best friend, because she'll tell you also how we met. But we've known each other for decades, and we live in different states, and yet to be able to do this and move the needle and make the world a better place, which is really my interest in positive psych, so that we are happier and better people. It's pretty lucky.
Yes. And I feel like if you believe it, this is something I'm still grasping on. Like you can believe it can happen. It can. But like your dream job with your dream human, with your kiddos and your family close by, with space to do, what you want to do. I mean, it can all be a thing. And so here it is. So it sounds like you're more than deserving. So thanks. Mad congrats on that.
Thank you. I feel really, really, really grateful.
Yeah. All right, Misasha. Hit us with the truth.
I know, right? So our story starts similarly, and then it goes very different. Which is why we work, though.
Mm-hmm.
So I grew up the daughter of a Japanese immigrant who is my father.
Okay. Similar parts of Japan. This is random fact, but I've been to Japan twice for lacrosse. And I'm not even that well traveled, but we happened to go to Japan twice, and it was awesome. And we actually stayed with the family, so I got to see the culture
cool.
it was so awesome. And it was the first experience where I'm like, we're not that different. Like we could barely communicate because they barely spoke English, and we were like typical Americans. We did not speak Japanese we knew a couple things. Watashi no me wa Kristen. Is that pretty close?
Good. Yeah, that's pretty close.
A little bit of stuff. That's all I got from my college education. Just kidding. But we went there twice. So it was fascinating country and just awesome. So there's my piece on that.
Awesome. Yeah. So my dad grew up in Tokyo.
Okay.
And he came to the U.S. on an exchange, actually created by a family who had lost their son in World War II in the Pacific Theater, and never wanted that to happen again. They wanted to foster an understanding between the United States and Japan. So my dad's school in Japan and this small boarding school in Connecticut set up this exchange. So every other year they would switch students. Like a student would go from the US to Japan or from Japan to the US. And the deal was you had to spend 3 years in that country before you could come home.
Wow.
And this was in the 60s and the 50s. So it wasn't like you were seeing your family. Like when
That's a huge commitment.
It was
a young
huge.
person.
Yeah, I know. So my dad was the second son. My uncle was picked first. Couldn't go because my grandfather said, sorry, you're the first son, you're staying here. So as you can imagine, that worked out really well for my uncle and dad's relationship.
Wow.
Yeah, so my dad was, I think, the 9th person to come over. So he went to St. Paul's.
Wait, and sorry, this is just in your family? Like
this is in my family, yeah.
That's okay.
So, he was the 9th person to come over on the exchange.
Yeah.
So my dad, and he went to school, small school on the East Coast, did not speak English when he started there. So when they had him write stories about plays or something that he had seen, he could describe the curtain and he could describe the seats, but he couldn't relate what had happened because he didn't understand the words that they were saying. So he came as an immigrant, spent 3 years here, started college here, and then continued college here, left and came back and built his family here.
Okay.
So I guess we've had this cohesive trying to bridge cultures and communications and gaps and narratives in our family for a while.
And here you are with a podcast. Like,
I know, it is meant to be.
I mean, that's so awesome. Yeah.
It's meant to be. So I grew up in California and went to Tokyo a lot of summers for forced Japanese education.
Oh, okay.
So I did ballet. Sarah went to Japanese school
in Japan in the summers.
Yes.
For a month at a time.
Wait, so you go to school out here and then your family, like the tradition was to go back to Japan and take Japanese schooling?
They just didn't know what to do. Basically, from the time I was 10, I would be sent to Japan by myself instead of summer camp. Go hang out with your grandma. They didn't know what to do with me. And so it was a 2-month thing, and the Japanese school was still in session for a month of it. So they were like, well, why wouldn't we just enroll her in the local school? So I'd be like the token foreigner in the 80s going to the local school.
Wow, that's so you got no summer vacation?
In Tokyo Disneyland a lot.
Oh, okay.
I did get that.
She got that.
Okay. I mean, summer vacation is really nothing to write home about in general, but just speaking basically, it's like, oh man.
So yes, lots of summers in Japan.
Okay.
I went to college, which is where we met, and we can tell that story in a
Where
little
did you
bit.
guys go to college?
We went to Harvard.
Okay. I was wondering if someone was going to say it, but go ahead, girls. Okay.
Yes, we went to Harvard. We met both coming out of a meeting that was for the Half Asian People's Association, where the question presented was, are we half a person or double a person? And that's when Sarah and I, and probably a couple other people, collectively decided that this was not a conversation that we thought was worth having, and got up and walked out. And so in our resistance, we met each other.
Wait, and this was happening at Harvard?
Yes.
Of all places? Okay.
Yes.
And what was the timeline on this?
So this was your freshman year and my sophomore year. So mid-90s.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow, that's not that long ago.
No.
Okay.
But it feels like a lifetime.
Well, I know. I mean, I graduated in '99, so yes, I'm with you. But to think that's a conversation then, mind blowing.
Yes.
Okay.
So I also, after graduation, I sold my soul to finance. It's a theme.
Yeah.
And lived in Tokyo and Singapore, a little bit of time in Hong Kong for a couple of years. Decided that this was not going to be my dream job.
Yeah.
For a whole host of reasons,
Yeah.
and came back to New York to go to law school.
This is just a whole other kind of selling your soul. But I mean,
You're a masochist when it comes to education. But respect, okay? This is like, you're never leaving the library.
Yes, well, as a side note, my parents got their stereotypical Asian dream. My brother's a doctor.
Oh, yes.
I'm a lawyer.
Okay.
Right.
Good luck to whoever you guys marry. It's like a whole thing. Okay.
So I still am a lawyer, but when I graduated from law school, I went into big firm law, worked a million hours, did trials, got completely burned out. So I got married, and my husband is a Black man from Louisiana. We, at the time, he's also an attorney. We were working at different firms. He's has gone on and stayed at big firm life, but we have 2 boys. And when we had our second son, I was like, this is it.
Yeah.
It is not a profession. It's working towards being better for women, but it is still not a profession.
Meaning it's like a man's world is what you're implying?
In particular, I was in intellectual property. So patents, hard sciences, of which I was not a hard science person, but trade secrets, a lot of that is still very male dominated. So it was very difficult for partners to hear that I couldn't do a conference call at 5 because I had to be home to relieve our nanny, because we did have one at the time.
Yeah.
Because their thought was, well, don't you have someone who does that? It's like, yes, that person is me. I understand you have someone at home who does that, but that's me.
Okay.
So it was time for a change. So I did a complete 180 and opened a bar fitness studio.
Oh, okay.
I had taught bar fitness for years. I had danced for a long time. And so I opened a bar fitness studio. I ran it for several years, sold it a couple of years ago, went back doing part-time litigation. And can't get away. I just love it so much. And then Sarah and I decided to make this podcast thing happen. And so that has been great. So it's been a balance of being a litigator, a very logic-oriented person. I went back to fitness coaching to do Megaformer fitness coaching now. And then they're the boys.
I was gonna say, and their parents. Let's just keep that in there. I love this so much, and I obviously knew their background. You listen to their very first podcast. They do an eloquent job of explaining their background and rhythm. And so if you couldn't catch all that, listen to their first episode. They do a great job. So I had to pretend like I didn't know a little bit. And usually I don't do research on who's coming on because I love people talking about themselves from their point of view. Because you can Google and search everything nowadays. And that's for everyone else. So check them out on that. I just love that, it's kind of like I lost my voice, I found it, I break through. And how beautiful it is that you now pack all this wealth of experience to come and share your voice and give all these life lessons now for anyone to listen to. I mean, that wealth of experience and academic, exposure and family and, cultures and countries. And there's so much there to unpack. It's phenomenal. It makes me as, a consumer and a listener in America, happy that people are coming to the table and coming to the mic and sharing this experience from authentic space. You didn't just sit behind a computer and learn about and Google, Japanese culture and this and some of my academics, it's a lot of reading and, exposure, education versus experience. So it's so wonderful that you guys can bring both those to the table and then share that accordingly. Any listener, that is such a gift to streamline all those experiences into a conversation. So that's huge. So I just want to put kudos out for that. You're welcome. As you know, I do a lot of personal branding and management, and my passion piece for starting the podcast is to bring transparency to the game. I hail a lot from marketing, branding, whether it's a major sport fitness apparel situation or a small consumer packaged good. I've kind of worked with all different levels and the humans behind a lot of that, and there's phenomenal people in the mix. And there is a lack of transparency. If anyone knows supplements or consumer packaged goods or even personal brand management, not everyone is telling the truth, and not everybody brings to the amount of experience, not even a quarter of it, of what you guys have. So to know you're coming in and using your voice and sharing what you have learned is miles ahead of a lot. And that other major side of my passion piece of this podcast is recognizing the power of the microphone, of marketing, of influence. Our kiddos have cell phones, at 6 months. And there's I'm not kidding you, they're watching, these kids unwrap toys and whatnot, and they're drinking in ads as they're watching kids play with toys on YouTube. The influence of...
We could have whole conversations.
I know.
I know.
I'm not even a parent yet, so I'm like, okay, dogs, that's enough TV time. But I know, again, I'm on the marketing side, so I know how powerful these messages are. And if reality is nothing more than perceived meaning, really OG philosophy, who's creating that? Marketing companies? And then I come in, I'm like, well, maybe they're not all telling the truth. It's like, well, shit, okay. This is my graceful disruption. Like, okay, let's bring to the table. So again, just to reiterate, the fact that you guys have the experience you do, and now you're taking on the responsibility and the opportunity to share your voice, huge. So long transition there. Tell us about Dear White Women, the podcast. Tell me a little bit about the why. You kind of led into why right now, but why right now? What's it about, and what do you hope to do with it?
So I think after 2016, it was a big wake up call for both of us
because of the election.
And I think before that we had been having, we've had conversations about race, about gender, about all those things.
Just as friends.
Forever.
Sure.
But it became very real that we were in a divided country in which people are moving more and more into their individual spheres. And for me, in particular, what was happening in the media and how people of color were being treated was, as a parent, scary, super scary. Because here's the example that I always give, and it's very true. And the moment that I realized this, I was frightened for my kids. So I have 2 boys, and my husband is Black. My husband has been Black and for his whole life, obviously, and been profiled for that for his whole life. Driving while Black is a thing. Being stopped while Black is a thing. Being questioned when he's on the playground with my son in our neighborhood is a thing. And what was heartbreaking for me is I thought that there is an actual chance that my husband walks out our door, one of my sons walks out our door and doesn't come back because of the color of his skin, because he's wearing a hoodie, because he has a cap gun, because someone just doesn't like him, because he's driving a car, because he's in a car. There are so many ways and so many examples that we have seen in which there is privilege and there is disparate treatment of different people. And that fear, we didn't want anyone, any parent, any human to have that fear. So in order to really address that, though, we had to have conversations and we had to start talking about it, because these are fears that were new to me, but they were not new to all of my in-laws. They were not new to a whole host of people, every person of color. But they were new in the circles that I moved in the communities that we were in. It was very new to discuss these. So we wanted to bring these out, to acknowledge that these are difficult conversations. These are really hard to have when you take a hard look at what we are like in the United States and how we can be better. But we wanted to do that to show other people that, hey, you can have these conversations, and through these conversations, you can make a change. You can have it be better. It can be better at some point.
And I think it's about the external observations and structures and history and institutions that have been in place for years. But I think the other thing we do is it's about that moment you take for yourself, and you're like, oh shit, did I have that thought too?
Right.
Did I cross the street because there's a black guy coming down this? Like,
Right.
have I ever done that? And it just gives that opportunity for reflection, not just on why we are where we're at now, but what are the things that we hold inside that we don't want to admit. But if they're true, it's okay that it's not, I mean, I say it funny, but like,
it's there.
It's there. Let's acknowledge it, and let's unpack it, and let's figure out what you can do to change that. Not to not listen to your gut instinct, right? If something feels unsafe, you know, sure, cross the street, do whatever you need to do, but just give yourself that moment to think again and process it. So, yeah, I mean, we basically decided to have these conversations, and she brings the history and the law. I bring the psychology and human thriving, and we have these conversations.
And I bring
on
the
the show.
tequila in case you're wondering.
Well, and can we talk about these shirts for a second? Because
absolutely,
you were talking about branding, and for those who are listening, you can't see us, but we're wearing.
They're wearing their brand. I mean, yeah, it's good.
It wasn't just to show up on here.
Oh no, I didn't even question it. They're like so humble and kind. Like, I'm like, oh no, you bring all the logos. If you know me, I walk around like a walking billboard. Mostly just because it's funny and I'm that a-hole, but also because it's important. So I complete respect. I appreciate you wanting to clarify. But we
got asked. We were really psyched. We were asked to do a event at the Denver Women's March.
Yes.
So
just huge.
Which is really incredible, and I'm so glad that they took what I think was getting criticized for being a predominantly white female.
See, I didn't really even know about this. Can we unpack this just briefly, and then we'll get back to your podcast. So Women's March, it's been going on for 3 years, right?
Yeah, this is the fourth year.
Fourth year. Okay, so this is the fourth year. Denver is one of the larger ones, and I thought it was all positive. I want to say it's around 1 million people. Is that right?
Here, or are you talking about nationwide?
No, I don't think that's huge.
It was, but I think I don't know whether it's complacency that set in since the initial outrage of the election, and like we need to really fight, and then people have dwindled. But there's also been enough criticism, I think, that had people say, well, we're showing up to March. A, is anything changing? B, are we really representing all women, not just white women? You know, what's the narrative? And I think Denver did an interesting thing, which was to split from the national narrative.
See, I didn't know that either. Full transparency, I don't know a ton about the event, and I honestly didn't even know what was going on the past 3 years. I mean, I knew the Women's March as a whole was happening, but I didn't know Denver's was happening or that it was that big. So when we had spoke, I'm like, oh, well, this is huge. And then the more I dug into it, I'm like, this is phenomenal. And as a newer cast, it's a huge nod to you guys to be invited into the mix. So regardless of what the logistics were, it's mad congratulations for you guys. But about the event specifically, the more I unpacked it with my friends, this is kind of like an uncomfortable conversation that's coming on as I have my podcast, but we don't want to go to the event. We believe some of these events actually marginalize our women further. And I'm like, oh, okay, tell me all the things. And I can kind of see that side, but I'm somebody that's, if you have something to say it. If you want to be seen, go do it. If you want to be heard, talk about it. To take a stand and not do something isn't my natural space. So, but it's just interesting for me to hear that side of it. So then when you had said there was some kickback on it, I was like, okay.
I think they did a phenomenal, I mean, you told me what you think too. This year, they did a phenomenal job. and they changed the spelling, so it's not women with an E, it's WOMXN to represent all sorts of women and the harassment and the abuse that we've taken also. And then they switched it from just a march to an expo.
Yes.
Where, I mean, it was packed.
The expo was, yes, they said there were 1,200 people in there in the first 15 minutes, which is basically capacity.
And it started at like 9:30 or something. I saw the traffic this morning. It was crazy, not crazy early, but pretty early for it to start and then go essentially all day.
Yes.
It was,
So that was
it was
impressive.
powerful. And I applaud them. I mean, I'm really, really grateful that they invited us on, obviously, just because it was a great opportunity for us. But the fact that they are inviting uncomfortable conversations, that they wanted us to purposely talk about stuff that's not the mainstream narrative. I mean, hat tip to all of the board for
Agreed.
for making that opportunity and really running with it. So
well, I think that's and this is where I think you guys are so poised at the right time without like strategic, business agenda. They need people of different races and different origin and all to represent the conversation. So there's 9 white women planning it. They need you guys, not to take away from any of the credentials, but they need the credentials plus like the authentic space of coming from that arena to speak on behalf of it. So your timing around all of it is like, it's incredible. Like, of course, opportunity is going to come. So I don't know, it's exciting, and I'm excited. I hold space for all events because I know how hard it is to plan. I mean, I've never worked on an event on that scale, but to plan that, execute it, all the moving parts are hard. But then to do an extra layer of finding, again, authentic speakers, not just going through what's easy. A friend of a friend that has a cast, let's just put them up there. They have dark hair, that's good enough. Let's get them up there. So, I applaud my event humans that go that extra mile because it really does make a huge difference. So.
all that is to say, that's why we're wearing these sweatshirts. Because I saw this morning.
Very long
Everything
version.
else happened, don't worry. Okay, so back to the cast. We're talking about kind of our unconscious social and cultural norms. Like you said, you cross the street, do I go jogging at night as a female? No. Like all these things that are ingrained and is conscious, I think, as we are, or as I try to be, having a cast and being in the mix of, what's relevant or trying to push the trend-setting tip towards larger conversation. I'm kind of in it. I know for, let's say, not our regular humans, but people that aren't, it doesn't involve their job or their professional space. There's no reason outside of their own heart space to like dive into these conversations. I think it's hard. And it's, if we get locked into like kiddos and job and our daily, we're busy or whatever the good excuse is, it's kind of hard to want to ruffle feathers or want to push the needle forward when life's kind of easy. And I'm not saying I justify that. And I do understand, it's kind of like Maslow's hierarchy. If I'm, worried about food and rent and whatever, I'm not worried about gluten and racism. Like, it's just not a thing.
Right.
So, and that's fair. Like, we are human beings. Like, we're, humans at the end of the day. So how do you guys, I should say it this way. I applaud you guys. My first experience at Be Golden, they had a speaker come out and it was basically like, white women are the problem. And I was like, oh shit. Okay, what did I do? Like, I've been on the defense before. Like, let's unpack this. And it's not that I agreed or disagreed at that point. It was still kind of a new conversation for me. And again, athlete, education, all of the privilege things, still new conversation. The way it was approached was such a learning experience for me because it's like I felt so attacked, and so then what does that evoke? Defense. So this is my dog Cleo in the background, not my entire. And so I saw, in these heavy conversations, key point for me that I entered in as a space of safe space. Let's have conversation. I'm here to hear your view, whatever it is. Please listen to mine, and then let's see why we're similar or different. So what I love what you guys do is present the facts, present what it is, and present your opinion, but it's alongside the angles of. We want to conversate. We do want to make the world a better place. It's not here to blame or be mad or what have you. And all those emotions are justified. It's how do we get to the next level? How do we move the needle, for our kiddos and future generations to understand one another better? So long-winded point, how do you guys balance that coming into the cast of, maybe managing some of those emotions of anger and blame and those things, justifiable? How do you guys come at, white women delivering the message? Is that strategic for you? That it comes in a balanced approach, or tell me what that space is.
So I think a lot of it, and we've talked about this at length.
Let's talk a lot.
I know. What? I know that sounds very surprising, but a lot of it comes, and we recognize that sometimes there is this disparity between what's talked about because of a knowledge gap, right? Yeah. And it's ignorance, but it's not necessarily purposeful ignorance or, you're trying to ignore something. It's just you honestly don't know.
Total lack of exposure.
Right. And there's a lot of history in this country that we have not really acknowledged in a lot of ways. And I think slavery is a great example of that. And if we can't acknowledge that they're in all of our societal constructs, then it's really hard to have that conversation. So I think we come from a place of really trying to break that down so that we're educating, but in a way that's approachable, right? Because we're not trying to blame anyone, because sometimes you're ignorant that's not your fault necessarily.
One of the things that you pointed out, or like in some of the research we've done, was the difference literally in the textbooks between states. So if you grew up in Louisiana, your understanding of slavery, I think it was something like under 10 mentions of slavery in the entire state textbook, whereas Massachusetts was over several hundred mentions, right?
That's such a great point, right? And how you're exposed to it. So how you're exposed to it from a very early age. And I was thinking about this, I'm going to tell the social studies story.
That's a great story.
By all means.
Well, so my older son had to do a social studies project, and I thought this was really early for a project because
he's in California.
He's young, yes.
Okay.
So I was whatever.
It's
whatever.
How old was he?
It's 7.
Oh wow.
So
okay.
right. So school gets hardcore very early these
Okay.
days apparently, but it was about countries of origin.
Okay.
And so he needed to draw, it was a whole diagram, and he needed to draw the flags of his family's country of origin and do the dress of his family's country of origin. And so it's like, great, on my side is Japanese, Scottish, English. And then I was like, oh shit, because it was a conversation that was going to involve slavery. Because from my husband's side, we can't trace it back because slavery destroyed all records of what country of origin my husband's family is from. So we can say Africa is a continent, but we don't know anything really past that, which is not a normal construct. I think if you've never had to think about that, you don't think about it.
Certainly,
right.
But even as an adult, have we thought about that?
Right. When you're thinking about country of origin projects, I never had this issue growing up. And so we're sitting there, it's like, okay, so here's how it is.
Yeah.
There was slavery. He's like, that really sucked. It's like, yes, it really sucked. And it's part of our history, and this directly impacts our family.
Yeah.
How should we talk about this in this project? So what we settled on is we would do the flags of my side of the family, and for my husband's side of the family, we would say, because of slavery, we can't trace anything further back than Africa as a whole. So I told his teacher, because I didn't know if he was going to get up in class and be like, yo, so there's all this thing, there's this slavery thing, and he's the only half black kid in his class. So that was going to be real shocking for a whole bunch.
And there's no other black kids in the class? Or?
Nope, no.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So, and to her credit, she was really cool with it. She said, look, it is a thing. It's a thing that's real for your family. Yes, and we're not going to go deep into, the history of slavery in this country at 7, but we are going to mention it and acknowledge it because it's also a learning moment for the kids in the class. Yeah. And for their parents, because when they come home and say, hey, this kid mentioned this is an opportunity to start having those conversations. Because there's all that information out there that shows that rather than saying things like we don't see race, everyone sees race. Kids see race from a very early age, and the earlier we have those conversations, and as parents or as people who know young humans, it's so great to be able to have those conversations in a really open way, so that when they're 16 or 13 or whatever, whenever their history book goes into the details of or not of slavery, they're not blindsided and immediately defensive because they didn't know this, and suddenly they're feeling like they did something wrong, or their ancestors did something wrong. So it was eye-opening for me as a parent and as a human in that moment that we were going to have this conversation. We're going to have it now. So,
and it's a thing that I think a lot of white families don't realize. I wish I had I always pull out this cheat sheet. It's like, your kids are not too young to talk about.
I was thinking about your cheat sheet. I was totally thinking about that.
The conversation, but I think if I'm remembering it correctly, but kids as young as 6 months can recognize the difference in skin tone.
Okay.
And by age about 4, kids are showing peak racism, like differentiation by race.
Okay.
And there's a study that they did, regardless of race. This was a red shirt, blue shirt kindergarten study, where they separated
I
kids.
heard this.
You're right.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I don't
Yes.
mean.
No.
Okay.
This I'm just tell it for everyone else.
All right,
It's
so
very
red shirt,
relevant.
blue shirt. They had kids in a kindergarten class. They split it in half arbitrarily. Half of them wore red one the whole week, and the other half wore blue the whole week. There was no separation about them before then, but by the end of the week, they asked, "What do you think about red shirts?" And they're like, "We're cool." "What do you think about blue shirts?" "Well, there's nothing wrong with them, but we're better."
Yeah.
So even at kindergarten, you can see similarities and you band together, and it's not necessarily that everyone's worse, but you think you're better,
Yeah.
and that's just human. That's
So you're
human
in your sports
development.
team or where you're from or what
Yeah.
have you.
Mhm.
Yeah. It's this is a whole other conversation in a podcast, but it still fascinates me to this day of at what point were we as humans, even if you have that like I'm better than you, another human's waiting on you or taking care of you, or like you not just stand there and think you're better than somebody, but they're actually of service to you. Like at what point was that a piece of the puzzle, and then that came down to slavery, hundreds of years in the making, and then carried through. Like it just blows my mind as a human being you could treat another person like that. And again, I know I didn't live it, I'm not from it, and now as I unpack it further, it's further mind-blowing of like you had somebody live in your house and you treated somebody. It blows my mind. Like it literally blows my mind. So it's fascinating again as human beings. You kind of like unpack our deep DNA, and then you add in social and cultural norms. I don't know. It's so fascinating to me. And then again, from the marketing branding lens, you see this group think and these points of influence, whether it's a paid spokesperson or a parent that finally decides to speak up and say, we're going to talk about this now. The ripple effect of that influence is huge. And if you have young kiddo, that's identifying race at 4, okay, well, how long has he been watching YouTube? Since he was 2. So now it's 2 years of influence in addition to our like older school studies, to now it's what their media environment is and what's on the cell phone.
Well,
So-
and to that point, I think what I was going to say was people who are of color have these conversations with their kids like all the time, from the time they're babies. And so many white families are like, I don't talk to my kid about race.
Yeah.
It's so uncomfortable, but it's not that people of color want to talk about it. They have to in order to survive, or because projects come up in social studies, and so why, it's just yet another easy way for us, if you have a predominantly white family, have the race conversation, continue to talk about it. It's not like one sit down moment where you're like, there's this thing called race and we're different, but it's all the little teachable moments where you can engage in the conversation. It can happen at dinner parties for us adults too, where people just say offhand comments, and instead of shying away or keeping the peace, there's a way to communicate without it being like a big fucking deal. You can just have the conversation.
Right.
And point out the stuff. So
And when you guys, maybe on the cast or in those moments, have you seen once someone is receptive or hears you, and then you kind of get where you don't disagree, then you agree, then you kind of find all the layers that you do have in common? Where it's like, I had no idea, but I'm so glad you said that, and I'd love to hear more about this. I'd love that you guys are doing a podcast. Like, has it like kind of opened up a door where maybe like you're on a different point of the platform, and then you guys find the commonalities within?
I think maybe by virtue of the fact that we both grew up having to have those two narratives in our lives because we're half white, half Asian.
Yeah.
We've always personally had to bridge that gap. So I feel like I can float in conversation with a lot of different groups.
Sure.
What I found in terms of our podcast listeners so far, I think you have people willing to come along for the ride and engage and be like, that's interesting, or I may not agree. And then you have the people who are like, you called it the Dear White Women podcast. You're racist.
Yeah.
You shouldn't call out white women like that. And so we have to differentiate our capacity and energy to be like, well, who can we have this conversation with so it's productive? Because there are so many different people and so many different experiences and everything that has made them. I think we have to say, not only is it our life that brought us to where we are, and we're not just the summation of our experiences, but the generations that come before us.
Absolutely.
And so people just come to this conversation from different points. And I don't know.
I mean, the reason I asked that is because Turmeric Tequila is designed to not be an expert really in anything, but to pull out the experts in all these different heavy conversations that need to happen, and then present that to my audience, or audience that will soon be there, to be like, okay, well, you want to know about what's going on with equality or racism or fatness fiction or what have you. And the reason I asked that was because the more I unpack these conversations and we we usually agree, but like say we didn't agree, the more we unpack and get to know each other, the more I'm like, oh my god, we're really not that different. And as cliche as that sounds, it's the honest to God truth. Whether it's again about colorism or fatness fiction or whatever, we start to get like to the human side, and I'm like, oh my god, my mom did that too, or what. So I don't know. I just didn't know if there was like, once we get past the hard conversation, it is hard, but is it that hard once we keep going and then talk about it, and it's like, oh, you know what, I actually do see what you're saying. And I experienced, not the same thing at all, but like I felt off. I don't know, whatever like the commonality is as the conversation continues. That's what I've seen with my podcast. I didn't know if that was like a piece of your guys' puzzle of what's happened yet.
Well, I think there's sort of two ways to look at that too. One is, I think people are used to a singular narrative. And what we are trying to do is really bring out the differing narratives. In my house, I've said this before to you, but one of the reasons why I was attracted to my husband in the first place is because I felt like
he's so sexy.
Oh my God, he'll love me forever.
Yeah,
he'll love me forever. But it's because growing up half Japanese, half white, there was always a dual narrative in my experience. Even if, as my kids even told me, I look more white than Auntie Sarah.
Apparently.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Which, okay, yes.
Yes,
I look my Asian.
Judge according to
Okay.
y'all.
My kids, total judge of race.
Okay.
But
tell the truth,
they
by
will. But, living this dual existence in the United States, and my husband, being a Black American, lives that dual existence as well, because he's a Black American, he's an American, but it is very dual in certain, whatever sphere he's in, it's changing. And he's been told he speaks so well, and he's been, yes, exactly. But he's so used to it. And we have these conversations in our house now, starting to with our boys, which is heartbreaking also. But I think a lot of what we do is bring out those different narratives, and that is difficult for people, because if you're used to one narrative and that's the dominant narrative and that's the narrative you're comfortable with, it takes a while to get to that place. And the other barrier to sort of getting to that place is your natural reaction, right? To being told that, hey, maybe the way you're thinking about this, or what if we think about it this way? It's our natural reaction to be very defensive to that, to want to block out. I know it's my natural reaction for sure.
Yeah.
So getting past the defensiveness is something that we really talk about a lot and work on, and we try to highlight those narratives to find those commonalities for a listener to hear a story about someone who looks nothing like them, and maybe nothing like them, but to hear those moments where you can mesh and you understand.
Connect in some
Right,
capacity.
exactly. Like you were saying, my mom does that too.
Yeah.
Those are what we're looking for. So sometimes it doesn't happen in the conversation, but we're hoping it happens as when you're sitting with that afterwards, because we talk a lot about sitting with your feelings, sitting with that defensiveness, sitting with the anger, sitting with the irritation.
At the end of the day, we're human beings.
Yeah.
Everybody that we're talking about is a human being, and we experience the same emotions. We might experience the world differently,
Totally.
but our humanity remains the same. And so the more we can build empathy and paint everybody who has become a caricature of themselves and remove that, like just start, I don't know, peeling back the layers and being like, oh wait, here's the humanity in it. Do they deserve that? Yeah, they might have made a bad choice. Do they deserve that punishment? Or, just to try to be curious about, am I looking at this truly in a way that is an accurate representation, or am I putting my own values and my own lens on this?
Yeah. And I mean, even just that simple question of like, why am I thinking this, and where did that come from? Is it what I actually think? Did I get this from media? Did I get it from my parents? Did I get it from my friends, some influencer? Like, where is that coming? And I think even just to ask if that was the next step in the right direction, I would take that. Like, that to me, it's certainly, it's not that it's not enough, but our young people in particular, like kind of questioning that better way and just like getting more in touch with themselves earlier is, I mean, it's huge. And as you guys both kind of said and then alluded to, it's so many generations prior to us that put us exactly where we are. Like, change is slow. I mean, things like change kind of happens fast, but like in the major scheme of things, it takes a lot. And like these little actions are major pivotal points. And then it takes like the next person to like carry the torch onto the next level. And that's a huge undertaking. And like, even if we can't see it right away, like ideally the generation after us, picks what they can and then like continues it forward. So I don't know, the ripple effect is just so huge. So I think it's important to keep the door open.
And I do think that skill of like the critical thinking skill, I mean, one is missing in our education system. At least I don't think I learned how to think until college, right? I learned how to memorize shit.
Good job, Harvard. You got something good out there. Okay.
She's going to be doing promotional videos now.
Yeah.
But I think that skill is exactly that. It's a skill that's not just about race. Then it's like, are smartphones really good for our kids? It kind of goes, you can live a better life if you, I'm not saying be skeptical about everything and everyone, right? Like trust your gut and all that sort of stuff. But I think just having a lens of questioning is a healthy way, we can create a healthier life. And not just the short game of, well, what will that do for me tomorrow or, in the next week, but what is that going to do 30 years down the road? And we've talked about, I think in the States, we're really, really short-sighted and our elections are every 4 years and what'll make it through today. But other countries take a really long game.
Oh my God. Well, look what's still going on. Look at the Middle East and everything else. I mean, there's women's rights. Like, there's so much we could unpack there that, yes, in America, as much as we can, romanticize or criticize some things going on, we do have a lot of positivity. Like, there's a long way to go. Don't get me wrong. And we can walk around as free women and drive a car and speak our minds and do podcasts. Like, of course, I think that's the norm. And I think we should acknowledge, this is still going on.
Mm-hmm. Well, and unless you are aware, going back to education and information, unless you know what life is like in other countries, you have no idea how good so many people have in this country.
Yes. Again, Maslow's hierarchy, but it's
also wealth and equality. Like, there's always the asterisks and digging down into it, but just be thoughtful.
Yeah, agreed. Again, from the marketing and branding lens, I kind of chuckle when companies spend so much money on the packaging, completely necessary. And you unpack it, and it's always about the product. And to me, that's kind of like humanity and how we are as humans. Like, okay, we are the skin color and looks and all these things and Botox and blowouts and all my favorites. And you take all that away, it's like your soul and your heart, it's the same. It's the product. It's like what's really there. So like the packaging, okay, whatevs. It's like, what is the product? Like, what's really happening here? And again, the other commonality that comes around all the different podcasts is that human space. Like, we just really are human. And if you can take care of yourself, that is like almost the baseline of every cast that I've had. Take care of yourself, question that right away, like get to know you. Mm-hmm. Then we do like the, change the world, heal the world, everything else. Do you want to lean a little bit into like the balance around academic science and energy, universe, how that plays a role?
You're talking to a Reiki practitioner.
Yes, I know. I didn't have a way to it. I was just gonna like drop that seed and let you run with it.
She's like, eye roll. When I mention my energy stuff, she's like, that is not how I operate. I do not meditate.
Well,
and I'm like,
it depends. I mean, there's some energy stuff that I believe in, but sometimes we're admittedly kind of on the far.
And that's okay. I love that there's even like two different sides between you two, like presenting a position aligned, and then within the relationship, there's also, not aligned. What's the opposite of alignment? Disalignment. Okay, I was sure. I was like, I'm making words up.
But to her credit, she accepts me and loves me anyway.
Yes, and that's the whole point. Yeah,
it doesn't have to be her life. It's my life, and she gives me this. That's one of the things I've loved about you forever is that you don't judge me. You support me and love me because whatever it is, you see the inside of somebody, and I mean, I just appreciate that. So.
Oh, good love. And that, but again, that's authentic space that this entire your message is stemming from. Like, even that is so huge. You're not only preaching and talking and are justified in speaking what you're talking about, you're living it and you're doing it and you're being it. That is so huge. And that's, I think, the lack of transparency in marketing branding world, which it's really not all about business, but the influence is so there in society and culture. Mm-hmm. It's so important. So when it stems from authentic space, it completely changes like the entire path moving forward. So that's huge. So that was a wonderful little authentic movement that just proved
I
love you. Best friends, wine and toe painting. Okay, so tell us a little bit about your Reiki and just because I love the science. I know, but I love the science and academic, and then the woo, and like I love how they cross over.
I had my Akashic records read. And so
wait, I don't know, Akashic records?
Yes.
Oh no, I'm gonna need a full explanation.
Effectively, the idea of the book of life?
Yes.
I have run across a woman who wrote an incredible book, and when we were both writing books together actually, and she was like, do you want me to read your records for you? And it's basically like, what is all of the stuff that has gotten you to where you are kind of thing, like all your past lives, I think is my understanding of it. But as I was talking briefly, and then it was like this dialogue, but she was like, you are meant to bridge the gap. Because I always said, look, I know that I have the capacity to be intellectual, but I also know that I am really ruled by energy. And I don't understand because I have felt inadequate, because energy is woo and it was not good enough. And intellectually, I'm like, but I'm not tough enough. Like, I really am more sensitive to everything, like energy, food, all the things. I'm like, what the hell? And she said, you are actually meant to bridge the gap because you speak both the language of professional stuff and energy stuff.
Turmeric and tequila. Yes.
Right?
I'm here for yes.
She was like, you talk in your professional world about setting goals, and in your other world, it's manifestation. And it's the same damn thing. It's the same
yes,
thing.
I cannot agree more. Yeah, 100%.
So that's my take on it.
Wait,
you
why
guys see goals differently, but
really quick, why did you feel like those worlds were battling? Because you couldn't be both things, like in general?
I felt for a long time, as I was silenced, like nobody silenced me. I silenced myself, and I really had a hard time being a stay-at-home mom. So I think I was in a funk for a while.
Sure.
My kids are amazing, and they've taught me so much.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that during that time, having come from Harvard, working at Goldman Sachs, like I was at the external I did all the check marks for all the things that people say are successful, and I made a lot of money back then, you know?
Yeah.
Then I went to making zero money, having zero external validation. My kids weren't like, you wiped my ass really well today, Mom, thanks. Like,
But it's the most important job in the world.
But
That's our
nobody
future.
tells you it. It is.
Yes.
It is, but it's a mind fuck.
Sure, sure.
And so, to me, having that silence for a while, my default when I was really rediscovering my voice was, what are all those people, the Harvard, Goldman people gonna say about me? And what would they say if I showed up as a Reiki healer who was really happy staying home with my kids and contributing in my corner of the world versus changing the world and gallivanting about and doing all these adventures? Who am I? And is that okay? Am I enough? And I just finished reading Michelle Obama's Becoming, and like she asked herself, "Oh, it's great, right?"
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah.
And she talks about, am I good enough? Who am I? Like, I think that is, we talk about overachievers, right? And I feel like it probably is the perpetual question in the mind of people
never
who,
enough.
right? And I finally have gotten to a point where I'm enough.
Yeah.
And I feel really great about it. But I think in that transition, when I was really accepting that I am a sensitive person, I don't have to apologize for it anymore. It allows me to have conversations and empathy and build trust with people that might not otherwise initially do that. With someone who shows up like me, they do. And I have that, I'm really grateful for who I am because I can show up in that way. But for a long time, I felt like I had to prove it to those other people.
Of course.
And so that's why I thought it was not good enough.
I think, and we won't digress on this, but isn't that kind of like a wonderful parallel of like the whole conversation you're having around like two white women? Like, it's the social and cultural norms of, they think like maybe they're acting in behalf of a way, or maybe not, but of how impacting that society or groupthink is on not only your choices and your decisions, but what you think about yourself. I mean, it's kind of this, it's a different conversation, but kind of the same. Like, we are such a product of our environment and what's going on around us, and consciously and unconsciously, it's a similar scenario. And that's why the more I try and unpack stuff for my own world, I'm like, bitch, fix yourself. Like, whatever it is, like, get reins on it, because I can't understand or question any of these other things until I have my shit in order. And until it's, I don't know, I could say it's in order, but we're getting there.
But we're always a progress.
Right, and that's great. And I'm
so
okay
shit
with that.
happens, and then you change. Like, it's okay to be
and that's
evolving.
living.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
But having that awareness is so huge. So I was just curious, and I love that it was the energy and woo, and people are in love with resume. Like, they love it. That's what we're trained to be. And I mean, my mom is absolutely the strongest female I know, and like a huge influence of everything I do now. And I've, thus far not chosen to have a family or anything, but I know how important of a job and how hard it was for her to be at home and do all these things. And she's equipped to do everything I do and then some. But that was so important. So I won't digress further, but I just think the parallel of these conversations is so incredible. How one kind of mirrors the others, but it's two different things. I'm winding down a rabbit hole. But
we can keep going.
So we're doing Reiki and energy. Give me your thoughts on where it appeals and where it maybe doesn't appeal as much.
Well, so I've thought about this some because, for a lot of my legal career, I taught fitness. And that is somewhere where you have to read energy, because you can't teach a class of 11 people on a megaformer or 27 people in a bar fitness room without understanding what the energy feels like in the room. And you can feel the energy change. You can feel individual energies change. You can feel that. So that was really the first time I had experienced that, because law is obviously
Robots.
very sorry. Okay, I understand. Okay, A, it's not like Law and
There's nothing wrong with
Order.
robots. Okay, there's nothing wrong
Everyone's
with
seen it on TV. Everyone's seen Law and Order. They're like, I know what you do. It was nothing like that. I did a case for 2 years that involved a lot of marketing and advertising, because it was dolls.
Okay.
It was the Bratz dolls and
Oh.
versus Barbie.
Oh.
So it's on that case for 2 years.
Oh my god.
After that, I was like, my
Okay.
kids are only getting wooden toys. I'm never looking at ads again. I was in,
Yes.
reviewing toy expos. And so I understand that world and the power of marketing
yes,
and advertising,
okay.
because I sat in it for years and had to have experts testify as to, the power of packaging, and were they actually copying the 2003 Barbie Winter Wonderland
Oh my
trio.
gosh.
And then that was the first time I left law, I think, after that.
We'll podcast about all that.
Oh,
at some
yes,
point.
there's so
That
many
is
things to talk about.
Awesome. Okay.
I never had girls, so I didn't really have to live the
Boys
Bratz
can play with dolls.
world.
too.
That's true,
Yeah.
and I keep waiting for them to ask me for one, and I'll be like, absolutely not, and let mommy spend
Not 'cause
2
you're bored,
hours.
just 'cause I'm gonna
Let
tell
mommy
you.
spend 2 hours breaking it down for you.
Okay, Mom, I don't care that much.
Yeah,
Can you
no,
try? Yeah.
I know, I'm just trying to wear them down so they go away. So I think for me that was a really important balance, and why I've always been drawn back to fitness coaching and
Yeah.
fitness teaching, even though I have a very analytical, logical sometimes, although clients are not logical, they're anything but logical, and that's why you're in litigation in the first place. But it was sort of a negative and positive balance too. So there's always that balance, because as a litigator, no one wants to talk to you. Your clients don't want to talk to you. The opposing counsel doesn't want to talk to you. The judge doesn't want to talk to you. And then I would walk into a room where it was mostly women, especially in bar fitness, and they would want someone to talk to them and lift them and be their cheerleader and be their coach and be everything for that 50 minutes or an hour that they were paying for. And so that balance has always been very important for me. So I understand.
So I mean, that's
the
intuitive
energy.
right there. And if somebody walks in sad and they're not going to want to work out, you feel it. Like,
You can feel it, and you
Oh.
feel when someone comes in upset or angry or having a bad day, because that radiates
Ooh.
throughout. So it's so powerful, especially the negative emotions are very powerful.
100%.
So yes, I understand some of it, which is why I love you so much,
Yeah,
because you
too,
understand
yeah,
all
too,
of it.
You know,
So,
she is, and she's not. I mean, I joke about the profession. It's not about her at all.
but it is a balance, I think, and I feel that pressure too. Is this enough? Am I enough?
Yeah.
Trying to juggle everything and thinking about work and family and your own needs and where does that fit, and then there's the resume, and we are Harvard grads, and I just had I didn't go, but it was my 20th reunion.
Okay.
Wait, it was, yeah. I was like, did I
Like,
just
how
age
was
myself?
it? Yeah.
It was my 20th reunion, and then you think you get sort of the outline of what everyone's been doing, and curing cancer and founding nations and all of those, and
Like,
then you have those moments.
Podcast.
Yeah, you have those moments where you think, am I enough? But I feel, especially in my 40s, I feel good.
Yeah.
This is enough, and
This is enough.
and I think as women, and we talked about this
Y'all are
today.
doing a lot. You don't know me well, but if it does or does not matter, it's a lot and it's more than enough. So yes.
Well, and we talked about this today about how as women, we are often each other's toughest critics.
Oh,
and
sure.
Women are much harsher on women than sometimes men are, or we are on men. And so the importance of really embracing all women and really thinking about, although we're different, how we need to band together, because a lot of things are about women first and all the differences much later.
Yeah. Well, that's, something we see a lot in media, which I'm really excited that that's starting to change. Even around like the race conversation, you see like TV shows and commercials now with same-sex couples and that stuff is even if they're trying to monetize it on the back end, which is a whole other conversation. It's not, a moral compass. It's more of like a monetizable one, whatever. It's still furthering awareness. But I'm with you. I think there is such a deep conversation around women kind of getting away from you see it on TV, like the new girl walks in the office, so she looks, her pantsuit's ugly or whatever. And it's immediate, like, women against women, and because we see that, so it happens. So it's a very conscious of, like, don't make fun of her hair, or don't do this, or like whatever it might be.
Mm-hmm.
I think I am genuinely fortunate, like showing up to an event, hosting a podcast with people that don't know me. We're not talking about the weather, we're talking about deep stuff, where I think most of them were either my age or younger, really open, didn't care, didn't ask a lot of questions. Like, I see a shift in our younger humans, and it's pretty awesome to know that, you know, maybe I am that old, but and you know, like the change is happening. I mean, if you can kind of mine for the gold, like it is out there, so it's a positive note. I'm not letting off the hook on this woo. So we're intuitive, we're in fitness. So no balance around, I mean, like meditation or anything else fitness wise.
I did try that.
Okay.
What?
Well, I told you.
These are all secrets from you.
No, I told you this story a long time. Well, I went to a Bar 3 retreat, right?
So
when
they
I
made you
first opened
meditate.
this to you. Yes, no, it was forced meditation, but
So long ago.
I know. But it was very powerful because it was the first time I had actually felt that, and it was a longer one. It was a 30-minute guided
That's a long
meditation.
time.
So it wasn't just a hot second of, it was serious, and we like, there was an arc, and you could feel the change in the room, and I do believe in it. I just am really shitty at doing it in my own life. So I know we've talked about this year. I know.
Meditation is hard. I'm a fan of it. I believe in it. Every card I've ever read, I just did a card reading on air, which is also really crazy and vulnerable.
Oh.
It was the last cast I just posted, I think, last week. I don't even know what day it is. We had 3 casts this week, which is amazing.
Yeah.
But anyways, it's intense to be like, here's what I am telling me. Some of it was good. Anyways, meditation's hard. Like, even as you practice it and you get good, and are you a regular meditator?
I'm going to interrupt the conversation if we're going to ask that question. So
By all
my
means.
thing is, I wasn't, even though intellectually and all the positive psych work I know, like there are scientifically proven things that are good for us as humans.
Sure.
And meditation is right up there. And so I didn't until I took it seriously. I went to my GI tract got fucked last year, and then it affected my mind. And so I fell into a bit of a depression. It was a mild one. It was all bio, like your gut and your brain connection.
Yes.
Like
Yes.
I said, I'm sensitive. I know that's exactly what happened, and I knew it wasn't going to be permanent because as soon as I got on the antibiotics, it fixed it. But I used it as an excuse to double down on all the things, the habits that I knew could help me.
Okay.
So at that point, I stole my husband's Muse headset. Have you heard Muse?
What is it?
So it's like a
visual. No,
it's
how
like
do you spell it?
MUSE.
MUSE. I know Muse.
It's
Tell me about it.
Amazeballs. So
Okay.
basically, it's a headset that you wear behind your ears and across your forehead, and it measures your brain waves. And it's
Oh yes,
connected
I
to
do
your app.
know this.
Yes.
I do know this.
So I stole his thing and basically was meditating every morning. And I went from like 5 minutes a morning being like, what am I doing? To now like doing a lot more, and I do it regularly. And now I know I'm cranky if I don't.
Yeah,
It's amazing. And then they have this new Muse 2.0 headset that measures, like you can measure your breathing. It measures your heart rate. So you can meditate based on different things, not just your mind. And it gives you biofeedback.
Yes.
So you hear, like if you're calm, the birds are tweeting. And then you're like, oh, but did I remember to take the dog out for a poop before I meditated? Is he going to have a shit on the floor? And then all of a sudden it's like a storm in soundtrack. It keeps you on like accountable.
Yeah.
So you actually measure how long you meditated for, whether you were calm, how many minutes you were calm, active, or neutral. I sound like a walking advertisement for
No, so this is deep in the human optimization, where a lot of like our special forces, like there's the Aura Ring, again, marketing brain. I'm mildly exposed to a lot of it. Or even a Fitbit that tracks your steps, how well you sleep, blah blah blah. I think there's some. I don't know how accurate all of it is. I don't know a ton about Muse, but I will say if there's positive side effects to anything, it's great. And I think knowing, what you're supposed to do and not meditating is like diet. Like I'm not supposed to eat Cheetos. Am I still gonna eat Cheetos? Probably. They're not a sponsor, so we don't talk about them. But you kind of know what you can and can't do, and we're still humans.
Mm-hmm.
But I think when you start to see like these positive pieces and meditation, I was doing it like 5 minutes a day, which is pretty JV. But as I was consistently doing it, I would almost crave it. It was crazy.
It's like exercise, right?
100%. And that's why I actually think you would, if it
I
spoke in the
probably
right
know.
capacity.
I told her when she's ready, I'm like, I'll buy you a Muse gift for like, I'll up it and we'll just do it.
Well, and then, we can go, I am such a believer in family members had PTSD and brain health and like how the gut and the brain connect, and it is like food allergies or your harboring anger and your liver's off. Like there's we can go so much further into it. And then you navigate around diabetic medicine or Zoloft or any of these, I want to say mental medications, but that's not the right term. Anyways, we can navigate around pharmaceuticals and those things. And so, yes to all what you're saying, and check out Muse if it works, because meditating it's so hard. It really is. It's like you sit there still and it's like, I have so much shit to do. How am I going to sit here still and think about nothing? And then once you get used to it, there's like this crossover. It's a game changer.
I mean, the way that I justified it eventually was I knew I was in a funk, and then I said, there is nothing more important in my day than getting my mental health in order.
Yes.
So that I can show up for everything else I need to do. And so starting with that to build the habit was incredible, because now I find I can, like, even when the kids are home, I can be like, I need to go do my meditation. I know it's a Saturday, but I'm going to go. And it's been okay. The kids know I meditate now.
Dude, and how cool is it that they see that? And like now what are they? How old are they?
They're in elementary school, like higher elementary school.
Okay, so in elementary school you understand meditation? That wasn't a conversation in my household. Like, even ready to agree with it, then I'm like, oh, just to, again, understand another self-help situation or getting more in line. I don't know. I mean, these little things are just so huge. Like, it's huge to yourself in the world. So.
Yes.
All right, so I can't wait to hear. So you're at, I'm sorry, we'll go quick on this. You're at the retreat. You had to do the 30-minute meditation.
Yeah. Well, I loved it. I thought it was
you
great.
Did like it.
I did like
okay.
it. No, I'm not anti that. I mean, growing up in a Japanese family where you firmly believe, and my family really strongly believes, especially for women, that the women in our family are very intuitive about certain things. And so, and through a lot of stories and experiences that we or my cousins or my aunts have had in Japan, I believe that it works. I just started trying to do it when my younger son was 1. Yeah. So it was a terrible timing on my part, because I was super sleep deprived. Yeah. And I'm like, let me just take these 5 minutes. And like, no, like I'm gonna drink a coffee in 5 minutes, or I'm gonna drink this whole glass of wine in 5 minutes.
I was gonna say coffee's for it. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so, I might be at a space in my life where I could try that again. I know.
You all heard it here first.
I'm convinced. I was just curious.
I'm going to issue a disclaimer. No, I'm just kidding.
I really just want Muse as a sponsor. Which
I actually I had the opportunity to introduce the founder of Muse.
Of
so she was phenomenal, and she is a neuroscientist. So she is for real legit and invented this device and is incredible. Like, she is this petite woman with so much power.
I love it.
So,
well, the first time you texted me that photo of you with the Muse, I was like, sister, we might have to have a little chat about this, but apparently it's great. Yeah. So,
I've heard good things, but again, the mental health, and that's going to be, I think, the next, it already is a big conversation, but it's going to be the next big conversation. I've had neurofeedback's a local, I've had her, neurooptimized, sorry, I'm one of my cast, Rachel, she's the founder. I've had kiddos get off Adderall completely, and I'm not a doctor nor a scientist. I'm just saying, if kiddo family things, if you're questioning a different way from what's going on, neurofeedback is unbelievable. PTSD, I've had people that are completely healed and have turned in all their medicines to the VA. I mean, it's remarkable conversation. So we're super digressing. I'm gonna do a hard turn as they meditate a little bit, but during my long-winded conversation. Really quickly, why specifically, we kind of talked about the podcast, but why specifically white women? I want to cover this just so, as a white woman, because my experience initially in that conversation was so it was almost repelling. So then I know I had to lean in and we're going to unpack it. But why specifically for the podcast, and why not just women, or why not just everyone? Give me, and I've listened to your cast, but give it to me as though I didn't already know.
So I think, we can start with statistics, because we do love them. So, and we were just talking about this today, but we, like the royal we.
I am a little bit like that.
You do like it. Yeah. Okay, one of us might like it more, but we both like them. And we were just talking about one of them today, especially after the election and Trump was elected. Yes. And, leading up to the election, where Trump had said some terrible things about women, very misogynistic things, and I think he lives that, every day. And so we, Sarah and I, were outraged, as were a lot of women. And so it was so hard for us to understand when the statistics came out that 53% of white women, and 44%, of which there was a subset, 44% of college-educated white women voted for Trump.
Yeah.
And our heads exploded, I think, because it was so difficult for us to reconcile everything we knew about how he hated women, and yet women are voting for him. And when it was compared to 90% of Black women voted for Hillary Clinton. So we felt that there was clearly a disparity there. And, people voted for Trump for a whole host of reasons. It wasn't, any one issue. And I think that was the amazing part. He has such a history in our country, as he's done so many things. He has so much wealth. He is a brand. You're exactly right.
And a word.
Yes, he is famous and he is infamous and all those things wrapped together. But I think we were looking ahead and more towards the long game and towards 2020 and thinking, this is a group that clearly we're having a hard time understanding that the why. And so we want to figure out if that why changes, and is that why based on a specific narrative? Is it based on privilege? Is it based on just ignorance? And again, not purposeful ignorance, but not understanding the history and why it's so important that we have people who support everyone in office. And so that's why we called it, we meant to be provocative too. I think we get a lot of questions. We've been called racist. But the title of the podcast really means a lot to us because it's sort of the underpinnings of why we're having these conversations in the first place.
Yeah, and I think, we talked about it where I think people were willing to overlook some of the humanity in the candidate in order to further a policy. They were like, well, this one thing speaks to me, so let me overlook that. Yeah. And I think I want to flip it so we really understand each other as human beings first and relate to all of us, and then can we look at the policy? I think if you're looking at the longer term, I think that's what we need to do in order to thrive, or I really do believe our country's on the brink of not being a world leader. I mean, that's being a little dramatic, as I sometimes am, but in the long term, you read about how empires collapse, and you really think about what is the future of our country if we're not putting our people first. And from a positive psychology standpoint, they have proven that countries that are, this is a phrase that they use, but like a we culture versus a me culture. Yeah. Those countries continuously are happier, are more productive, are more successful. And we are kind of leading the charge on the me culture. Yeah. So how do we flip that perspective and really look out for one another first so that we can be around as a country successfully thriving and continuing with the amazing things we do have to offer?
And I want to clarify, when I say like self-help, like mental health and all, I think it's just two, I want to be clear, it's two different conversations, like totally healing yourself and then caring about your fellow human are different and synonymous. No. Yeah, I think you have to do one to get the other, but the arching like lens of we need to take care of each other. We do need to be alongside each other. I will say, the more I didn't really pay attention. I've always voted since I was 18, and I've always been passionate about having a voice, not even to be strong female, just because, I don't know, that's just part of my personality. But with this recent election and what's going on, and I see like potentially that, women can't have control of their own bodies and their female rights, and this is like heavy conversation it's crazy, and then kind of what we alluded to earlier, maybe people don't pay attention until it impacts you. This coming election really does impact anyone, whether it's male, female, or race, or reproductive rights, or what have you. There's a lot at hand, and I think if there's any silver lining to any of it, that I do think there's more people are paying attention. I'm certainly paying attention, college educated, blah, 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 and really digging into issues more than I ever have before, and God, it's so overwhelming to know all that I need to know, and we've done a podcast on that, like pick out your main issues and kind of lean into those, because it is so much, and it's heavy responsibility around all of it. But kind of my base conversation around that is I have so much faith in our young humans and that they have been exposed to this, and now there is so much turmoil, I want to say, for what's going on, and we are at a pivot point as a country. I do have such deep faith that even if there wasn't an immediate change, which all fingers crossed, there's still so much unmeasurable change that is happening, and like our young people that are turning 18 that have lived in a different way, growing up with Muse or in a mixed race family or what have you, like they live such different realities than we even did, that we're on the upswing of things, but major digression. I just wanted to be very clear on what it was, because again, in my own experience, I felt so defensive in it, and I think it's phenomenal, not as a business person, but as a business branding person. I think it's really great that it's so thought-provoking. The title of it's very straightforward. Your displays what we're here to talk about, and it's in a very graceful space of here's where we are, here's where we stand, here's the facts, and this is why. And then it's digestible as white women to be like, oh, okay, I had no idea. And now we're talking about it.
There's definitely no blame gaming. Like we don't play that. There's no purpose in it. I think what we talked about before about let's be more thoughtful, let's be more educated, let's inform ourselves. And I mean, even our audience, I think we have a lot of men, we have a lot of black people.
Good.
Like our audience does not actually reflect the title of it, but I think we wanted to just make it clear that was, again, it was a provocative enough title. And really, you know, when you have the privilege, when you are a college educated white woman in this country, despite the fact that you're a woman, so you're still a step down from a man, you still have a lot of privilege, and maybe you can coast and not have to ever think about these issues because we are increasingly divided. You know, unless you live in a big coastal city, really you're not rubbing elbows in the middle of the country with many people who don't look like you.
Of course.
So it was just to grab people's attention, and I think it's interesting because it can rub people totally differently. Some people are like, we expected you to be two black people.
Yeah.
Sitting there calling out and getting angry at white women. And I mean, that's not it. That's not who we are, but that's...
I would think, just completely in my own stereotypes, would think your smallest audience would be white women. I would really just, if someone was like, I'm guessing, what would you say? I'm like, that's what I would say.
And we'll do a poll soon enough.
Yeah, okay, no, I'm all with yours for it. And like, hence it's important for me to be like, oh my God, yes, like, these disruptors, get on. Like, let's talk about it right now. And if I can maybe even be like a filter or other cast or opportunities to be like, you totally stereotype it, listen in on this. This actually makes a lot of sense. And they're incredibly intelligent, and you know, the resume's there, the facts are there, the way you say it's there.
And the woo-woo energy's
there. The balance is there. No, it's really a beautiful thing, but it's provocative, and it could be like repelling in some capacity. And if you just have a quick conversation, and like, wait, just listen in, then it's like, oh, then we like siphon them in, and then then the larger conversation can happen.
Well, and I think like it again, going back to, it isn't blaming, and we are trying to teach and educate and have conversations in a very thoughtful way, because it's true, change is slow.
Yeah.
It is the long game. But we've seen it even recently when wedding websites, like The Knot and Zoya, I think, took plantations off as a location where people get married.
That
because
was a thing?
Oh, it was a thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not the wedding animal. I mean, I'm not super traditional in capacity, but okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, P.S. We didn't get married on a plantation.
Well, I mean,
that would have been,
You definitely did.
that would have been super awkward.
Dude.
But yes, it was, because we, in one of our episodes, we had talked about plantations and how 90% of the visitors to plantations are white.
What do you go to see? This is completely. I know
you go to see the history of the plantation, but people and white visitors were getting upset with black people who were there portraying the slaves for telling the slave story, because they wanted to hear the story of the white people who lived in the plantation, which is very interesting. Because to us it was similar, you know, to going to a concentration camp, and you're like, I don't care about the Jewish people. Anyone, let's talk about the guards and their issues.
People want to get. All I'm thinking is energy. Like, you're gonna. First of all, the whole thing to me is like, whoa. But to get married there, that's
a big thing.
Oh, it was.
It was a big
thing.
thing.
Yes, but now
wow.
And bigger. I mean, I'm sure weddings are still happening there, but
I mean, there's much larger conversation than that. But to me, like, immediately, I'm like,
but that you have major wedding websites taking those venues off is a big step. And even if, you know, that might not affect the vast majority of the people who are using those websites, it's a sign, and it's a very public sign. It was very publicized. Yeah. So change might be slow, but it really just comes from awareness and people thinking a little critically about what is the history of this place that we might want to get married in.
Yeah. And how does it feel to the people? Like, it really is that combination of intellectual curiosity and let me empathize.
Yeah.
That's really what we each need to continue to grow in ourselves. And that's what we also hope to do. I mean, and when we say we teach, like, I'm learning all the time. The research that we're doing to put together these episodes is so fun because I am constantly learning. And I'm constantly like, holy shit, like, that really happened? Or this is really the case? It's fascinating because I love it. Part of my satisfaction comes from continuing to grow. And learning while we're doing this work has been really, like, rewarding.
Yeah, I learned something new at least one thing new every episode that we do, and researching it and all of that. It's really fun in that way too.
Well, I think it keeps you, I wouldn't say soul Botox, but it keeps you young and moving, and your brain firing, and like, and then again, someone that you trust and respect, countering your ways and then countering your views and then collaborating. I mean, it really is like, it's a phenomenal gift to have that stimulation and drive, you know, all the time, and now it's a thing. So I can't wait to see it grow. What are, you kind of just said to it, like, what would be like the main goal of the cast? Or maybe even your personal missions, like 10 years from now, which I hate when people ask me that, but.
Damn it, really?
I know, I'm just like, well, because the funny thing is, I'm maybe like, I looked at 5 years ago and be like,
right,
I want a podcast doing influencer marketing that was just made up 2 years ago. Like, none of it was even a thing. So I hate, but just give me like goals, and if you know in 10 years, like, I don't know how specific of humans you guys are, but I mean, there's some type A in the mix, so I feel like there might be some goals. There might be some goals on paper.
Just a little.
I mean, we did this when the decade switched, because I do a lot of, like, I don't want New Year's resolutions, I like intentions. So we picked a word of the year, and I really pointed out on our New Year's episode, which was more, you know, just conversation, by the time the next decade rolls around, I'm going to be an empty nester. So I think about my life holistically, and where is that going to be, and where does this fit into it? And I mean, so many people who do podcasts are like, oh, I have to do seasons, I have to take a break, which is legit for so many reasons.
Yeah.
I run out of things to talk about, whatever. I can't see us running out of things to talk about.
I was thinking about to make a joke there or not, but I was like,
really, and there's so many fascinating, I've been so grateful for the people who've been willing to come on, because we talk a lot, just the two of us, and then we also will get the opportunity to interview some incredible people.
Yeah.
And the people who've been willing to share their time with us and their conversations and opinions and thoughts and everything has been mind-blowing, and that's just continuing to grow. So I mean, until this feels, I trust my internal compass and the barometer, until this feels like it's either like we've moved on and we want to come up with a new challenge, and it switches gears to some other way of manifesting.
Sure.
You know, but I think this conversation is about long-term growth and investment in yourself to intellectually and emotionally continue to stretch yourself. So I don't see, because I believe I'm going to be the shriveled half Asian lady, wisdom, like, you know,
girl, you look
lady.
young, you're fine, you're good.
No, but I want to be like, I don't want my, just because, you know, one day I can't bear babies anymore, and I'm like, my fertility has gone down the shitter, doesn't mean that my value goes away. And I think society, like, I've always said that I want to be a value add in my 50s, 60s, 70s. Like, I want to continue to build that.
It's funny to me, the fertility is that, I totally get it. And you think about, like, I mean, if I think about myself from 20 to 30, and then 30 to now almost 40, oh my God. No, the value is increasing because so much has been learned. Like, oh, my 20-year-old self, like, I'm glad you can have kids, but don't. You're not ready.
You will need a hell of a lot more brothers.
Yes, that's also true.
But I really mean it more in terms of how society portrays women, right?
Yes,
like
100%.
We value all these young people, and that's fine. That's great. Yeah. Beauty is amazing. I think the human form is amazing, and there's a lot of strength in appearance and all that sort of stuff. But I'm talking about like value add, and so if that's the case, whatever direction this particular arrangement goes, I mean, we're good. We've structured this in a way that we've set our conversations so that it fits our lifestyle parameters. You know, the kids are home over the summer. How do we want to be able to maintain this conversation so that we can still be present for our kids? Yeah. Because of the way that we work together as people, I think we're able to have really honest conversations about what each of us needs at any given time, and make accommodations because of the respect that we have for each other. Yeah.
And I would say, again, going back to the long game, because in 10 years I will not be an empty nester. Oh my God, my kids will be with me forever.
You're freaking old.
I will be so old, I know. Well, also, that's what happens when you have kids later in life. Anyway, no, going back to that story of my husband and my kids walking out the door and maybe not coming back, that is a fear that I don't want our children to carry. Yeah. And maybe it's not realistic to say that they won't have that fear, because who knows how long it takes to really make change, or their kids won't have that fear. Yeah. So when I think about what we're doing, I think about that as the end goal, that there won't be any kids out there who are, living now or yet to be born, who will have that fear about a loved one. you know, in any form, whether it's race or gender or sexual identity or whatever that
Can't
is.
feed their children.
Right. Any fear, and that we can exist as humans first. And so when I think about that, that's the only goal I can really see. I see us working towards that and collectively working towards that in so many different ways. So if it's through the podcast form, if it's through another form.
Because who the hell knows where technology is going to be in 10 more years,
well, that's
right?
I was asking you, I'm like, you hate this question. We're asking it anyways. But it's true because, again, influencer marketing is pretty much made up. I was doing it before because it was content effective, blah, blah, blah. Then it becomes a thing. Then podcasts become a thing. Who would think we can sit and record and put our voices out there? Like, on the flip side of social media, the positive, now these messages, like these deep conversations that have taken years of wisdom and Botox and tequila and education
and wine sometimes.
and wine to have now somebody can just tune in and press play. Like, how unbelievable is that? Like, can you really conceptualize the way you can reach someone? That's where the deep responsibility comes in. But that's pretty amazing. And as slow as change is, I do think, again, with responsibility, and we teach filters, the right things can reach the right humans, and man, maybe change doesn't have to be as slow as it once was. Maybe not fast, but maybe just a little bit faster. So I don't know, but I think it's huge, and I think what you guys are doing is amazing. I'm so privileged to have you guys come on here and conversate and share your mission and your message and your experience and your family tales and energy and leading an energy.
You can't even say that.
Well, I know. I love it so much because there's just so many, like, when I listen back to things or just like reflect on life in general, like there's so many ironies that are in play. I mean, even with like deep education, you realize we're doing kind of like the one job, even though it's not fully like a paid job situation yet, that doesn't require an education, doesn't require anything. Like my kiddos that are opting out of school because they don't want school loans are starting YouTube channels, they're influencers, and they're making millions of dollars. Then I got a couple Harvard grads that have gone around full circle finance and everything, and now they're on it. So, and it's respect all the way around. Like, it's such an equalizing space, almost like fitness. You come in, it's like, we're all just in the gym. Doesn't matter about resume, what have you. So it's really, I don't know, I love all the deep ironies and like the things that kind of surround it that you don't see unless you like consciously like lean in. The universe, the world, God, whatever you, it's a funny display of situations and how things wind out the way they do. But tell me more, where can we find you guys? Give me handles, website. I mean, I'll post all this, of course, but tell me where the crew finds you.
Social media, I think we're really heavy into Instagram at Dear White Women Podcast.
Yes.
Same thing with Facebook, but we have lots of thoughts about Facebook. So
Yes.
there's that. And then on Twitter, because that was too long of a handle, we're at DWW Podcast.
Okay.
But basically, I mean, it's straightforward, dearwhitewomen.com.
Okay.
And you can find our podcast there. You can find it everywhere that basically you find podcasts, pretty much. Spotify, Apple Podcasts,
Google
all the things.
Okay. And I know today was the big event, but do we have anything else coming up that we need to look for you at? Does that make sense? Anything other events, speaking situations, anything else you basically want to promote?
Not as a podcast. We both have some individual stuff coming up, and we do a lot of separate work.
Do you want me to talk about that? Are there books coming out, magazines? You don't have to, but
we are actually writing a book right now, but that's different. I am going to be, if anyone's into positive psychology, I think the World Happiness Summit is an incredible place. I'm emceeing it. So it's a 3-day summit, Miami, weekend of, I think it's March 12th.
Okay.
So a couple of months from where we're recording right now. And it's really basically the leading experts and practitioners in the study of happiness.
Oh, this is, I'm going to sound super basic right now, but isn't this becoming like a actual degree? I guess it's like specifically around
You've heard of
happiness.
this.
Yes. Yeah, like, isn't happiness a thing? Like, I don't understand. So,
like, I mean, traditionally there's always been a positive psychology master's at the University of Pennsylvania.
Sure.
Marty Seligman started it and he has run with it. Now, my mentor, the one who I ran into, has been launching the study, the Happiness Studies Academy, HSA, is a thing, and they are now really working with the University of Miami to make it an actual degree through their platform.
Oh, so I thought it already was with someone or something.
Maybe that one, I don't know. And then there's like the Florida State University, FSU, also has the study of, I feel like it was like maybe it was FSU that was doing it. Oh my gosh, now I'm going to be in so much trouble because, as Misasha knows, I don't know schools or teams of sports or any of this stuff.
She does not.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry. You two can talk
So she was
sports all day
meditating,
long.
that's why.
Yeah, she was. She had the headset on.
It's in Florida, and they are, there are some seriously cool pioneers doing incredible stuff. Like, they're literally built a building based, like a student center, based on the pillars of positive psychology and built a space. Like, it's insanely cool. So there's a lot of stuff going on.
I wish this would infiltrate like our kindergarten curriculum. University, I'll take it. At university. Oh, hello. But
I confused you with
it's all swirling here. But our kiddos, man, I always want to shake up the curriculum for our young humans, like numbers and relationships and everything, like trigonometry. Cool, but there's an app for that. Let's talk about some. But anyways, I think that's phenomenal. So Happiness Summit, March 12th,
I believe.
Florida,
Miami. Yeah.
Okay. Anything coming up for you?
I think just a couple articles on Plinkett. Remember the educational site? The microaggressions one is finally coming out, and hopefully some others on race, which will build nicely.
What is Plinkett?
So myplinkett.com is actually an educational site for younger kids and parents. So you're
talking out of turn.
Check.
Oh, okay.
Check.
Plinkett. Right.
So it's basically they have a multi-pronged platform, I guess, where you teach about something, you learn about it, there's concrete ways in which you can act on that. So there's the do, and then there's the resources. So drawing on what we talked about in the podcast, there's one on microaggressions that will be posted shortly. There will be one on race, hopefully soon as well. So really teaching parents how to talk to your kids about it, and younger kids too, 4 to 6. Ideally. So in the kindergarten space.
That's amazing. Okay.
You're in the know.
but otherwise, it really is our podcast. Every Wednesday we drop a new episode.
Okay. Yes,
so
you guys are consistent. It's very well researched. The audio's great. They do a great job. Sincerely, you guys do. I appreciate you guys. I would love to check in maybe like 6 months to a year just to be like, what's going on, maybe we'll podcast and see what's going on. Not only like from evolution, maybe from both our podcast standpoints, but maybe like where the world is post-election.
Yeah, there's that nuggets.
I'm keeping the alcohol close, so don't worry about it. I've got turmeric in the fridge as well, so we'll keep it equal.
Thank you so much for inviting us into your universe and your space. We're really, really grateful for you, and you're just such a genuine, amazing human being. So thank you very much for having us and connecting with us.
Thank you. I really genuinely appreciate that, and that means a lot coming from you both. So please check them out. I'll post all their handles and everything, and there's stuff that's coming out. I'm guessing there's probably even more than that. But lean in, just follow them and see what's going on. These are some movers and shakers, some graceful disruptors. And I think we just might be hearing more about them outside of my podcast and their podcast on a larger level soon. So stay tuned. Thank you guys very much. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining Turmeric and Tequila with your host, Kristen Olson. Tune in next time, and don't forget to subscribe on Apple, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen.